My name is Mia, and I live in the town of Asheville, North Carolina, with my dog, Rex. Rex is the light of my life. He's a mixed breed husky with mostly dark fur but white streaks around his legs and face, and little rings of dark fur around his pale blue eyes that make him look like a mischievous character from a cartoon. I found him at a shelter when he was just a pup, right after my fiancée moved to Hong Kong for work. He helped me cope with the loneliness during the nights when I couldn't stand going to bed alone for the 100th time. Over the years, when my husband chose to start a family with a woman from his workplace, Rex helped me get through the heartbreak. Rex is a big dog, like a subwoofer on 4 legs. While most dogs need regular walks, Rex needs hiking adventures. So, every weekend, I take him to the Pisgah National Forest, one of the few places where he could really run wild. Dogs, in my opinion, aren't meant to be kept inside. They need space to explore, to feel free, and the forest was perfect for that. And honestly, I needed that too. A place to escape from the stress of my demanding job. The woods were my sanctuary. That all changed one chilly October day when I learned why humans built cities and towns. Because sometimes the wilderness isn't our friend. Rex had always been in his element in the forest. For such a majestic dog, he could be so goofy, and the woods brought that out in him. When he was free, his blue eyes would widen, his tongue hanging out, as he ran with joy, making me laugh at his silliness. But one day I noticed a shift. Rex, usually loud and boisterous, became a quivering mess, barely moving more than a few feet from me. It was unlike him, and I was concerned. When I stroked his neck, I felt him trembling. At first, I thought it might be a mountain lion nearby. Last year, Rex had become overly aggressive after an encounter with something I thought was a predator. The previous summer, there had been a rise in black bear sightings in the area, and local homeowners were warned to take extra precautions. It was possible that Rex had caught wind of a bear and her cubs, but his reaction wasn't just cautious, it was pure terror. I didn't know what to make of it, but it was clear that Rex wanted out of there, and so did I. The problem was, we'd already hiked a long way into the forest, and getting out wouldn't be quick. The further we went, the more anxious Rex became. He kept looking back with fear in his eyes, darting ahead, then returning to whine at me. I felt the fear too. Every step seemed faster than the last, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was behind us, even though I never saw anything. At one point, Rex ran back to my side and froze, staring at the woods as he sniffed the air. I thought it was over, but I was wrong. With a yelp that hurt my ears, he bolted ahead, barking frantically. That's when I heard it, a rustling behind me, and a massive creature breathing heavily. I ran, following Rex's barks as the branches tore at my face. I've never been so terrified in my life, knowing that something was hunting us. It wasn't something I could reason with or escape from. I ran until I couldn't anymore, gasping for breath, shaking with fear. I had to keep going. Rex's barks urged me on, and I couldn't afford to stop. But the forest was dense, and I couldn't see clearly, making it easy to trip. I fell hard, gasping for air as I hit the ground. As I lay there, Rex came to my side, barking fiercely as he defended me with every ounce of strength he had. It was terrifying, but also inspiring. I was so grateful that he was there, but even his bravery wasn't enough to hold off the beast. The sound of it roaring through the trees silenced him, and he rushed to grab my coat, trying to drag me along. That's when survival kicked in, and I was back on my feet, running again. The fear for Rex consumed me. What if he couldn't handle this? But he never left my side, always barking to make sure I knew where to go. Then we reached a riverbank. It wasn't wide, but Rex hated water. I knew he wouldn't jump, so I begged him, promising him treats, anything to get him across. But Rex froze, pacing up and down, too scared to cross. The thing behind us was getting closer. I pleaded with him, even offered him food, but he refused. Then, in a moment of pure panic, Rex darted back into the woods, heading toward whatever was chasing us. I felt like I was going to collapse. I couldn't bear to lose him. But then, out of nowhere, he came charging back toward me, leaping over the river in a single bound, his eyes wide with surprise and mine just as shocked. It was like watching an action movie. Rex landed, scrambling to safety, and we both kept running. I was exhausted, my legs burning, my breath shallow, but I couldn't stop. My heart was racing, and I felt like I might pass out at any second. I was gasping for air when I saw something move in front of me, something that wasn't Rex. I thought that was it, that I was done. But the next thing I knew, I woke up in the back of a pickup truck. A stranger, wearing hunting gear, was handing me water. I drank it in large gulps, and after a moment of panic, I realized that Rex was nowhere to be seen. I asked the stranger about him, and he told me Rex was fine, just inside their lodge getting some food. I cried with relief, but then the hunter told me something that made me cry even harder. Rex wouldn't leave the truck for a while, staying by my side, waiting for me to wake up. I felt so grateful that he was okay. I spent the next few hours recovering at the lodge, telling the hunters what happened. I mentioned the bear I thought we'd encountered, but I knew that wasn't the real threat. The hunters didn't have an answer, and when I asked if it could have been a grizzly, one of them said it was possible. But I knew that wasn't true. Grizzlies don't live anywhere near North Carolina. Those hunters saved my life, and I'll be forever thankful to them. But I know they were hiding something. I haven't figured out exactly what chased us that day, but I'll never forget the fear in Rex's eyes, or the terrifying silence in the woods. As I sit here writing this, Rex is lying beside me, ever faithful, ever watchful. In my darkest moments, I wonder how I'll cope without him. He's my protector, my hero. The story my grandfather shared with me has always stuck with me. He served in the military during World War II. On his 18th birthday, March 3, 1944, he joined the war. That timing meant he missed the D-Day landings and all the horror that came with it, but he was in time to take part in something even worse, the invasion of Germany itself. In hindsight, it's clear that Germany was doomed to lose the war, crushed by the combined power of the Allies and the Soviet Union. However, in the thick of it, in the fields and forests of Northern Europe, no one could have predicted the outcome. Germany still held out hope for victory, believing that the development of atomic bombs or stubborn defense tactics might turn the tide. It was into this uncertain phase of the war that my grandfather found himself, caught up in a brutal push into Germany. The Battle of Aachen began on October 2, 1944, as the Allies aimed to capture the city quickly to move on to the industrial Ruhr Basin, which was crucial to German war production. But just a few miles south lay the dense Hürtgen forest, where more than 80,000 German soldiers were positioned. The U.S. Army Task Force was sent into the woods to keep these troops from reinforcing Aachen. That's where my grandfather's story begins. His platoon had been assigned to patrol through the forest, searching for German positions. It had been a quiet morning until a distant rifle shot rang out. One of his comrades fell to the ground. The soldiers scrambled for cover, but it took a while to figure out where the shots were coming from. In the meantime, 3 or 4 more soldiers were hit by the sniper's bullets. Some tried to retreat under cover, but the sniper picked them off before they could make it. Soon, the entire platoon was trapped, unable to move without risking death. But that wasn't the worst part of the ordeal. The radio operator had been the first to fall. He bled out quickly, lying in a small clearing. Any soldier who tried to move him or the radio was shot at by the sniper, keeping them at bay. One man managed to grab the radio, but the sniper shot his hand, rendering it useless. Without the radio, they couldn't call for artillery or air support. More than 20 men were at the mercy of a single German sniper. My grandfather told me that every time one of the soldiers shifted position, maybe trying to spot the sniper, someone would fall, dead or screaming in pain. And each time, the sniper would laugh. The sound of his laughter, echoing through the trees, is what my grandfather said he could never forget. The joy the sniper took in each kill was chilling. Sometimes, the sniper would shout something, words my grandfather couldn't understand at the time, but later learned were Mars in der Morgen, something like March in the morning. The platoon was pinned down for 6 hours, though it felt like days. They had to lie there, completely still, as the bodies of their fallen comrades stared at them. One of the dead men, who had bled out against a tree, became a target for the sniper. Unable to find living targets, the sniper began shooting at the corpse, seemingly to torment the platoon mentally. My grandfather said they all flinched as each bullet hit the dead man's skull, making it crack open. The soldier's face, once familiar, had been distorted by the force of the shots, so much so that my grandfather barely recognized him. The sniper laughed louder as he kept shooting, turning the man's skull into a mess of bone and brain. My grandfather told me that seeing such a thing was unimaginable for someone so young. He was just 18, still a kid. It was something I can't even picture, though I know he was just a kid too. They waited for nightfall to escape, and as they moved back, the sniper's laughter still echoed through the trees. One soldier was so frightened that he ran straight into a tree, breaking his nose, but kept going. My grandfather passed away last year, and I think of him often, especially when I remember what he went through. This is my tribute to a brave man who survived such horrors. Rest in peace, Grandpa. One of the tallest volcanoes in Asia, Mount Fuji is also one of Japan's most revered sites. It is an iconic cultural symbol, and on clear days, people in Tokyo can often spot its perfectly symmetrical, snow-covered peaks in the distance. Mount Fuji is a frequent subject in art and photography, appearing on countless postcards sent across the globe each year from Japan. To the northwest of Mount Fuji, within 230 square kilometers of hardened lava, lies a forest called Keigahara, known also as the Sea of Trees. The forest can be dense in some areas, with the porous lava rocks in the forest absorbing sound, creating a profound sense of solitude. This eerie silence draws visitors for activities like hiking and camping, but Keigahara is also known for something darker. The forest has a reputation in Japanese culture as the home of the eerie, spirits of the dead from Japanese folklore. This reputation stems from the forest being a common site where people end their lives. Each year, many people venture into Keigahara to take their own lives. These tragic events have become so frequent in the past half-century that Japanese authorities have placed signs at trailheads, urging people to reconsider their actions and contact suicide prevention hotlines. In 2003 alone, over 100 bodies were discovered in the forest, a rise from the previous year's 78. By 2010, police reported more than 200 attempts in the forest, with around 50 successful deaths. Despite numerous warnings, the forest remains a place for such tragic acts, with hanging and overdoses being the most common methods. It is notable that suicides in Keigahara tend to increase in March, marking the end of Japan's fiscal year, when many face extreme pressures in their personal or professional lives. Local officials have even tried to reduce the public focus on these deaths to prevent Keigahara's growing fame as a destination for such acts. This trend may have been influenced by the 1961 novel Nami Note, written by Saiko Matsumoto, known in English as The Tower of Waves. The story centers on a couple who, unable to be together, take a trip to the woods near Mount Fuji to end their lives. The novel remains one of the most romanticized stories in Japanese literature, though it is not solely to blame for the suicides in the forest. Another influential work is Wataru Sorum's Kunsen ji Satsuma Neru, a manual published in 1993 on the methods of ending one's life, which sold over 1 million copies in Japan. In the book's postscript, the author, while not promoting suicide, argues that escaping life's pain through death can make living easier, reflecting a grim philosophy against societal pressures. The book, detailing various suicide methods and their respective ease, pain, and failure rates, was highly controversial at the time. Despite these cultural works, the association of Keigahara with death dates back much earlier. There was an ancient Japanese practice called batsui, where elderly relatives, unable to care for themselves, were abandoned in remote places to die. This practice persisted into the 19th century, long after other cultures had developed palliative care for the elderly. It is this tradition that led to Keigahara being considered haunted, as the spirits of those left to die may still wander the forest. In more recent years, the forest received renewed public attention thanks to a YouTuber, Logan Paul, who posted a controversial video in which he filmed a body in the forest. The video, showing a man who had taken his own life, sparked widespread outrage when Paul and his friends seemed to make light of the situation. The backlash was immense, with Paul's video being viewed millions of times before it was removed. YouTube removed Paul from its Google Preferred program and halted other projects with him in response. This event brought renewed focus to the dark reality of suicide in Japan, where more than 25,000 people take their own lives every year, about 70 each day, most of them men. In 2014, another tragic incident occurred when a 71-year-old man set himself on fire on a bullet train, forcing the issue of suicide into the headlines once again. It raised a grim question: what drives a person to choose death over life? For as long as such questions remain unanswered, the Keigahara Forest will continue to be a place where the lost souls are remembered, with colored ribbons marking their paths. My name is Amelia, and I live in the lush forests of the Pacific Northwest, specifically in the state of Washington. One of my resolutions for 2020 was to shed the extra weight I gained during my first pregnancy, weight that had knocked my confidence and left me feeling sluggish. My husband always reassured me that he loved me just the way I was, but I wanted to feel my best for him, just like he did for me. The problem was, I've never really enjoyed the atmosphere in co-ed gyms. Some places just seem like all people care about is meeting each other or checking each other out. On the other hand, some female-only gyms were poorly funded, making them not worth my time. So I decided to try hiking. I'd always believed the great outdoors could do wonders for my mental health, and I had used walks in the woods to fight off postpartum depression, which had helped a lot. I remember the excitement I felt when I drove to a sporting goods store to buy a good pair of hiking boots, along with a lot of waterproof gear in vibrant lilac, my favorite color. It felt like the beginning of something great. I even started asking for hiking gear advice in an online forum and couldn't wait to update everyone on my progress. But my first real solo hike was far from the peaceful experience I had imagined, and it made me develop a whole new respect for nature's unpredictability. My husband agreed to watch the baby while I drove out to the Olympic National Forest for an afternoon hike. Everything went smoothly for about an hour as I pushed myself uphill, feeling my thighs burn. The downhill stretches felt amazing, but then I tripped. I'm not sure what happened. Maybe my boot caught on a rock or something hidden in the dirt, but I ended up rolling and landing hard. I clutched my ankle in pain, but I could still put some weight on it, so it wasn't too bad, just a sprain. But it hurt a lot. That's when the strangest and cutest thing happened. A crow flew down from a tree and landed on a nearby stump. It began hopping around, flapping its wings, and calling out like it was singing for food. It seemed to have seen me fall and had come to check if I was okay. I told the crow I was fine, just a little shaken up, and it quieted down, eyeing me curiously. With my ankle still aching, I managed to get back on my feet, waved goodbye to my crow friend, and limped toward my car. But what happened next was the sweetest thing. The crow followed me, flying from tree to tree, keeping close to me as I slowly shuffled along, calling out every so often to check in. It felt so comforting, especially since the fall had shaken my confidence. The kindness of nature, in the form of this little crow, really lifted my spirits. But before long, my ankle began to swell, and with the swelling came more pain. As the pain intensified, it reminded me of the labor I'd gone through giving birth, and sitting on a fallen log to rest, I suddenly burst into tears. That's when my little crow friend swooped down again, singing its little tune and hopping around in concern. It felt like a scene out of a fairy tale, like something you'd see in a movie, where the princess is crying and her bird friend comes to comfort her. But then, something happened that made my heart race in fear. From about 100 yards up the hill, I heard something large moving through the trees, something that drooled as it got closer. It was a grizzly bear, fresh out of hibernation, and it was clearly starving. The crow began its frantic calling and hopping again, but this time, it felt different, urgent. At first, I thought it was warning me, but I was wrong. The bear charged down the hill, its steps rapid and heavy, as it rushed toward me. I didn't waste any time. I grabbed the bear spray I had bought after advice from my hiking group online, quickly removed the safety, and sprayed a wide cloud of bright yellow mist into the air. I was terrified, convinced the bear wouldn't be stopped, that it would tear me apart no matter what. But to my shock, it worked. As soon as the bear ran into the cloud of spray, it stopped dead in its tracks, blinked, and then started sneezing violently as the spray took effect. I didn't hang around to celebrate. Who would? I ran, as fast as I could with my swollen ankle, not stopping until I finally reached my car. Somehow, I managed to drive back home and I lived to tell the tale. Later, I did some research, and what I thought was my kind little crow friend wasn't what I'd imagined at all. As it turns out, crows have a special relationship with bears. When they see a wounded or weak animal, they'll swoop down and call out to attract predators, often leading bears to the injured creature. Once the bear is done, the crow gets to eat the leftovers. That day in the woods, I learned the crow wasn't there to help me. It was just doing what it does to help itself. If the bear had gotten to me first, I would have been the leftovers. I beg you, please listen to me. Do not go hiking in the woods around Pittsfield, Vermont. I know those woods like the back of my hand. I spent my childhood playing there with my younger brother, even before I hit double digits. Trust me when I say that something has changed in those woods, and not for the better. I first realized something was terribly wrong a few weeks ago, during an early spring hike. In March, thousands of small songbirds return from their southern migration to the forests around Mount Greylock. Their songs are sweet at first, but are really challenges, a way to warn rivals to stay away. But that day, there was nothing. No birds. No animals at all. It made me uneasy for two reasons. One, animals can sense danger long before we do. Their smell, hearing, and ability to read the atmosphere are far sharper than ours. If they'd fled the area so suddenly or refused to return, something bad could be about to happen. Two, forests get quiet when a large predator is nearby. Animals like wood pigeons will go completely still when they sense a bear or a mountain lion. Sometimes the predator moves on. Other times it doesn't. Either way, it wouldn't be safe to wander around in an area like that. So I decided to head back to my car. But that's when something strange happened. I grew up near Mount Greylock, exploring its woods with my brother for years. It was a little ways from where we lived, but with our bikes, we had a large territory to cover during the summer breaks. I knew that forest better than anyone, but somehow this time I got lost. I realized it when a dull headache began to throb in my head. I paused to rub my eyes and try to ease the pain, but when I opened them again, I was struck by a sense of panic. The woods looked unfamiliar. That was impossible. How could a place I knew so well feel so alien? I took out my compass to figure out where I was, but the needle wouldn't stay still, kept moving. I tried to adjust it, but it was no use. The compass wouldn't settle. At first, I didn't think it was a big deal. Sure, it was unnerving, but I could still find my way out. I tried to rely on the moss, which usually grows on the north side of trees, but when I checked, I noticed the sun was in the south. If not that, then the moss grew on the southern sides of the trees. It didn't add up. The more I tried to make sense of it, the more my panic grew. But I forced myself to stay calm. Panic only leads to mistakes, and I knew there had to be a reasonable explanation. I tried walking in what I hoped was the direction of the nearest road. That's when I found it. Something I'd never seen before, something completely out of place. In all the years I'd spent in these woods with my brother, I had never seen the old cabin that stood before me. I'm talking about a cabin so old, there was no way it could have been built after 1979. How could my brother and I have missed it? I had no idea. Naturally, I thought about knocking, maybe asking if anyone could give me directions. But as I walked closer to the cabin, something strange began to happen. At first, I thought I was just tired, maybe my blood sugar was low, but each step I took toward that cabin became harder. By the time I was at the door, it felt like something was pushing me away. It was as if the very air around me was whispering, "Leave this place. Never return. Don't look back." I knocked, and the door creaked open a little. The inside was just as run down as the outside. It looked abandoned, but there was something odd about the way the furniture was arranged. It almost seemed like someone came by every now and then. But there, in the corner, was something that caught my eye. What I saw was something I can't even describe properly. It was a wooden figure, a small idol, placed on a stone altar. My brain couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. The headache returned, sharper than before, and the anxiety hit me so hard I thought I might pass out. That idol, made of twigs, vines, and moss, was evil. Pure evil. And I ran. I ran like a terrified child, straight out of the cabin and into the night. The weirdest part? It was still daylight when I entered the cabin. I couldn't have been inside for more than a couple of minutes, yet when I burst through the door, it was pitch dark outside. I ran until I found the road, found my car, and drove home like a madman. I haven't told anyone about what happened to me until now. I tried to explain it to a hunting buddy once, but the words wouldn't come out. Please heed my warning. Don't go hiking in the woods around Pittsfield, Vermont. The fading glow from our campfire cast strange shadows that flickered across the tired faces of my friends. Laughter, once light and free, now had a strained edge. We were lost, completely and desperately lost. It had been a reckless idea from the start, an unplanned weekend hike into the uncharted depths of Echo Woods, fueled by youthful pride and a craving for adventure. The map, an old relic found in my grandfather's attic, promised a hidden lake, pristine and untouched. Captivated by the unknown, the five of us had set off. Now, as dusk thickened, the oppressive quiet of the forest gnawed at our nerves. We had been trekking for hours, the map useless by now, the thick canopy swallowing what was left of daylight. By some stroke of luck, we stumbled into a small clearing, a forgotten campsite nestled among the towering pines. It felt like an answer to our silent prayers, and a wave of relief washed over me as we unpacked our things. Olivia was quick to inspect the spot, finding an old fire pit outlined with blackened stones. Mike, the practical one, declared it perfect for a morale-boosting fire. Emily, unusually quiet, kept glancing nervously at the dense woods surrounding us. Tom, normally the voice of calm, was oddly silent, his eyes filled with an unsettling fear. We settled down for the night as the fire crackled, casting a warm glow while the first stars appeared. Mike shared ghost stories, though with less enthusiasm than usual. Olivia, ever the skeptic, dismissed his tales, but I felt chills run down my spine with each eerie story. The night became a cacophony of unnerving sounds, the rustling of unseen breezes, the haunting hoot of an owl, and the snapping of twigs under invisible footsteps. Sleep came only in snatches, haunted by dreams of twisting shadows and watching eyes. Dawn arrived reluctantly, casting a pale light. Exhausted, we ate a small breakfast, broken only by the clinking of spoons. Tom, looking pale and haggard, broke the silence. "We need to find our way out. Supplies are running low." The day passed in a fog of frustration as we walked in circles, the forest seeming to mock our efforts. Landmarks appeared, only to vanish. Paths reappeared as if to taunt us. The sun, once our guide, offered no direction in the thick canopy. Panic began to rise, gnawing at our sanity. By nightfall, we found ourselves back at the campsite, as if it were toying with us. Everything lay exactly as we'd left it. The rearranged logs, the half-burned sticks, even the chipped mug that Olivia had dropped earlier. This time, Olivia, usually strong, broke down, tears streaming down her face. Emily, wide-eyed with fear, whispered about being trapped in a loop. The next few days merged into a grim blend of hunger, desperation, and dread. Days blurred into nights, with the campfire as the only source of light in our decaying world. Mike, once full of energy, grew withdrawn, his eyes distant with despair. Tom, always the prepared one, lost his composure, mumbling about unseen forces working against us. Emily, the quiet observer, became a hollow shell, her eyes fixed on something invisible in the dark. One by one, they began to vanish. First, it was Mike. We found him near the fire pit, his eyes frozen in terror, a single scratch across his neck. Then Tom. We discovered him hanging from a low branch, his face frozen in defeat. Olivia disappeared without a trace, leaving me alone. Loneliness became a frightening companion, hunger gnawing at me and fear keeping me awake. The forest pulsed with a hidden malice, the creaking trees forming a sinister chorus. On the night of the full moon, as I searched for food, I found a hidden compartment in the fire pit. Inside, among the ashes, lay a weathered journal. Its damp, cold cover bore faded words of explorers who had ventured into Echo Woods centuries ago, drawn by a hidden lake, only to become trapped in a time loop, haunted by forest spirits. The final entry spoke of an offering to calm an unseen force. Despair nearly overwhelmed me, but a small spark of defiance flared within. I wouldn't be another lost soul. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, drowning out the forest sounds. Sacrifice. The word echoed in my mind. But a sacrifice of what? Blood? The thought made me shiver. Then it dawned on me, it wasn't blood that was needed, but the act of letting go. Hands shaking, I searched my backpack for the one thing of value left, the faded map that had led us here. It was a desperate move, but all I had. Holding it over the fire pit, I muttered a prayer I didn't realize I still remembered. I give up the path. I give up the lake. Take this and let me go. A wave of nausea hit me as I dropped the map into the fire. The flames flared up, filling the clearing with an intense orange glow before fading. An eerie silence followed, as though the forest held its breath. The hours crawled by until dawn finally arrived, bringing with it a sense of calm that hadn't been there before. The forest felt lighter, somehow. Tentative hope broke through my fear as I started walking. The forest, though unchanged, now seemed to lead me forward rather than twist to trap me. After hours of walking, just as doubt began to creep in, the trees parted, and there it was, a shimmering lake reflecting the morning sky. Relief washed over me, mingling with bitter loss. Had it all been real or some horrible dream? As I neared the water, something shiny caught my eye. Half submerged lay a compass I'd given up on finding. Its needle spun before locking onto a single direction, the way out. I left without looking back, and the trek out was grueling, but I faced it with a new resolve. Days later, I stumbled out of the forest, a gaunt, weary figure. The sight of the road brought a sob from deep within. I was free. The news reported us missing, presumed dead. They found our campsite untouched, the fire still burning. A chilling reminder of what we had endured. The map was never found. Some say the forest claimed it. Others whisper of a shadowy hand that reached from the flames to take its prize. The nightmares still come, vivid and terrifying, but with them is a haunting understanding. Echo Woods holds its own secrets, a dark power that I, the lone survivor, will always carry. I may have escaped that cursed campsite, but a part of me will always remain there, bound to the depths of Echo Woods, an unspoken offering to the unseen entity that rules over lost souls. The setting sun, a bruised, dusky orange, seeped through the thick canopy, casting an eerie glow on the tangled path. Sweat clung to my shirt as an unseen chorus of insects filled the muggy air. I shouldn't have left the marked trail. This barely there path branching off the main one had seemed promising, maybe even a shortcut or a chance to explore. But now, unease gnawed at me like a relentless mosquito. Silence settled heavily, broken only by the squish of wet leaves under my boots. The trees here seemed ancient, their branches twisted into unnatural shapes, clawing skyward. The air was thick with the smell of decaying plants, making it hard to breathe. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement. A deer, perhaps? My heart raced, but what stepped from behind an old, misshapen oak was no deer. It was a woman. Her clothes were torn, caked in mud, and her hair, a mess of knotted straw, obscured most of her face. Only her eyes showed, impossibly black, piercing into me. I could barely manage a greeting before she spoke, her voice a raspy growl that sent chills down my spine. "Lost, are you?" she croaked. I stammered, nodding. "Yeah, I took a wrong turn." She laughed, a sound like dead leaves scraping across the ground. Her laughter stopped suddenly. "Lost or lured?" she rasped, her words carrying a dark implication that made my stomach drop. I mumbled a denial, weakly trying to shake off my fear. She just stared, those black eyes seeming to dig into my soul. Then, as suddenly as she'd appeared, she was gone. 1 second there, the next replaced by eerie silence. Heart pounding, I spun around, looking for any trace of her. Nothing. Shaken, I told myself maybe she was just a hermit or a trick of the oppressive atmosphere. But her eyes, those endless dark eyes, stayed with me, a cold dread creeping into my gut. Determined to find my way back to the main trail, I pressed on. The path narrowed, sunlight barely reaching through the dense undergrowth. The air grew colder, a damp chill soaking into my bones. Then I saw it, a cabin, falling apart, nestled among the trees. Thin wisps of smoke curled from its chimney against the dimming sky. Desperate for some sign of humanity, though terrified of the unknown, I walked toward it. An old man sat on the porch, rocking slowly in a chair that creaked with each movement. He was gaunt, his face a web of wrinkles, a scruffy beard framing sunken eyes. He looked up as I approached, his eyes echoing the same disturbing darkness I'd seen in the woman's. "Lost, are you?" he murmured, his voice dry. The same question again. I shivered, nodding. My voice barely managed a whisper. He gestured to an empty rocking chair beside him. "Sit," he invited. Every instinct urged me to leave, but curiosity kept me there. I sat, my body tense, ready to bolt. His gaze was intense, pinning me in place. "You shouldn't be here," he finally rasped, barely audible over the creaking of his chair. "I know," I muttered, regretting my detour. "I took a wrong turn. Some paths aren't meant to be found," he said, his voice tinged with warning. Suddenly, a sharp knock came from inside the cabin, breaking the silence. The old man's face paled with fear. "Who's there?" he whispered, voice trembling. The knocking grew louder. A cold dread filled me. I wanted to be anywhere but here. "Stay here," he said, his voice barely audible, and he rose with surprising agility, disappearing into the cabin. Despite my fear, curiosity pulled me closer. I peeked through the doorway. Inside, a shadowy figure stood with its back to me, tall and gaunt, vaguely human-shaped. It knocked again, its knuckles making a dull thud on the weathered wood. The old man mumbled in a language I didn't understand, his voice shaking. Then, the figure spoke back in a low, guttural growl that made the floorboards vibrate. Its words sounded unearthly, a disturbing mix of hisses and clicks that sent shivers down my spine. The old man whimpered, and there was a sickening thud. A wave of nausea hit me. Instinct took over, and I bolted from the porch, adrenaline surging. I didn't look back, but the old man's faint screams echoed behind me. The forest had turned into a dark labyrinth. Every branch and rustle took on a sinister tone. I stumbled through the underbrush, lungs burning and heart pounding. Suddenly, the sounds behind me ceased. I stopped, leaning against a giant tree, gasping for breath. The silence was heavy, broken only by the thumping of my own heartbeat. The last light of day had gone, replaced by the eerie glow of a nearly full moon. Then, out of the shadows, a pair of glowing red eyes appeared, staring back at me. Terror seized me. A figure emerged from behind a twisted tree, humanoid, impossibly tall, its skin mottled gray, its eyes blazing red. It moved toward me, its long, clawed fingers twitching. My legs felt weak, betraying me when I needed them most. The creature let out a sound like a twisted laugh, sending chills down my spine. Just as it lunged, another scream echoed through the night. Not human, but enough to make the creature pause. Taking advantage of the moment, I ran, not caring where, just away. The forest stretched endlessly, a maze of shadows. I tripped, scraping my hands on the rough bark of a fallen log. Tears blurred my vision, but through them, I saw a faint light in the distance. Hope surged through me, a lifeline in the darkness. Ignoring the pain in my knees, I stumbled toward it. The light grew, revealing another decayed cabin in a clearing. Smoke curled from its chimney. On the porch stood a woman, her back to me. Her ragged clothes and messy hair looked familiar. Could it be the same woman? My heart raced, torn between fear and the need for human contact. I called out, my voice barely a whisper. She turned slowly, her face deeply lined but lacking that dark, unsettling look in her eyes. There was a weary kindness in them. She beckoned me closer without a word. Exhausted, I collapsed onto the porch steps. She knelt beside me, her expression a blend of concern and curiosity. "You're lost," she said softly. I nodded, unable to find words. She handed me a water skin, and I drank deeply, the cool water easing me. I recounted my experience with the old man, the creature, and the overwhelming fear that had haunted me. She listened, her brow creasing as I spoke. "These woods," she began, voice low, "hold memories best left undisturbed." She explained the forest was a strange place where time lost meaning, a tangled web woven by ancient forces. The old man, she revealed, had been a keeper, a guardian of the true path. But his cries, still echoing in my mind, hinted at failure. She herself, she admitted, was another guardian, one with a darker purpose. "I create illusions," she said, her eyes glinting in a way that unsettled me, drawing in wanderers rather than leading them away. Dread washed over me as I realized that the path I'd veered from was probably my way to safety. This woman had led me deeper into the forest's decaying heart. "Why?" I asked, the full weight of my situation sinking in. Her smile turned chilling, a mockery of human warmth. "We need new stories," she replied, her voice shifting, merging with a chorus of whispers and strange sounds, as if countless voices were pouring from her mouth. My blood froze. There was no escape. I was trapped, bound to this strange place and its terrifying secrets. As dawn cast a reddish glow on the skeletal trees, the woman's form seemed to change, her hand stretching into a clawed shape. "Welcome," she rasped, her voice an eerie harmony of whispers, "to your new role." The staff I clutched clattered to the ground, its warmth fading. The forest, once only a place of shadow and whispers, now pulsed with a dark energy. Branches reached out, clawing at my ankles, anchoring me. Panic clawed at me, but escape was impossible. I was trapped, bound to become something twisted and dark, a figure no longer offering safety to the lost. Instead, I would create illusions of my own, leading souls deeper into the forest's tangled web of forgotten memories. As the forest echoed with laughter, no longer that of the pursued, but a sinister welcome, I felt my identity slipping away. The memory of who I once was, the life I'd left, began to fade, as broken as the filtered sunlight through the decaying canopy. In my place, a new horror emerged, a hollow echo of humanity, entwined with the despair and madness of the forest. And so, the cycle continued, the forest claiming another soul, adding its dark twist to the story of the vanishing wanderer. A hidden truth, buried beneath layers of illusion and forgotten tales, warning of the price for stepping off the well-trodden path.